I am so thankful to get to talk to you today a little bit about disability and philanthropy, and talk about how philanthropy helps shape the lives of adults with developmental disabilities through its giving. First, I should start with I have no financial conflicts of interest to disclose. And then, as far as the overall goals, I'm going to talk a little bit about philanthropy and healthcare-focused giving. We're going to talk a little bit about With Foundation's history, our mission, and some of our funding priorities, as well as discussing some key components of what we've seen as far as service delivery program design from our years of funding in the disability healthcare space. And then I want to close by talking a little bit about why this matters. Ultimately, I'm going to talk a lot, hopefully not too long, and hopefully you can understand with the accent. I am Southern, so it'll come out probably, the longer this goes on, the more it'll be apparent. But as far as the learning objectives, I'm hoping that you'll leave with an understanding of the size and scope of philanthropy, as well as an idea of the healthcare focus giving, and then be able to identify some of the key components that we think really enhance healthcare service delivery and the experiences that adults with developmental disabilities have. So I'm going to start by doing my best Jerry Maguire impression and try to show you the money. Unfortunately, With Foundation is a smaller foundation, so it is not an option for me to write a check to everyone in this room, but I'm going to share the basic facts about what philanthropy is doing and what's going on in healthcare. So when we think about philanthropy, according to Giving USA, the field of philanthropy in the last year has given over $427 billion. Overall, according to Candid, that does specific research around foundation giving, about $76 billion of that is given through foundations similar to With Foundation and other private forms of philanthropy that's more formal. But overall, of that $427 billion, about 8% of it is given to organizations working in the healthcare space. So sometimes working in philanthropy, we talk about there is never enough money to go around, and there really isn't, especially as many of us know about the daily needs of individuals with disabilities and how costly it is to live the life and get the services that you need. Ultimately, even though you hear $427 billion, and that's more money than I can even imagine, only 8% of it goes to healthcare. That being said, I do want to talk a little bit about With Foundation and our history in the space and some of the things we've learned throughout the years. So the With Foundation was established in 2002, and it ultimately seeks to promote comprehensive health care for adults with developmental disabilities in ways that meet their fundamental and unique needs. When the foundation started in 2002, the first few years it gave more broadly to disability issues, and then since 2011, it's given exclusively around healthcare. We are one of the few foundations that exist that specifically give in the area of disability and healthcare. One of the things that makes With Foundation unique, and if you were reading more about philanthropy, every year different places talk about trends, and I'll have you know that according to the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, a trend for 2020 is community participatory grant making. Now, although more people are talking about it in the field of philanthropy, this is not something that's new to WITH. From its very beginnings, it's had people with lived experience of disability involved on its board of directors, and then now also involved through a self-advocate advisory committee, which advises the foundation on everything we do in our grant making, as well as our programmatic efforts. So even though it's a new trend for some, we've been around and doing it for a while. But when I look at kind of our year's experience and of the things we're funding, what are some of the common themes, common components that I see really makes a difference in the lives of people with developmental disabilities and makes for effective healthcare service delivery? So I'm going to discuss 4 key components when I look over the years of things we're seeing. So the first is that, and many of you have discussed this yesterday and today, and it's something that's close to everyone in this room's heart and how they approach many things that they do, but is care that is culturally competent, meaning that that when care is being delivered, it has the ability to understand, communicate with, and effectively interact with individuals from all cultures. This can also sometimes be described as programming that displays a sense of cultural humility. Kind of the tenets when we think about culturally competent care, or care that is delivered with cultural humility, is that it displays an awareness of the person delivering the care, of their own perspective and their worldview, as well as a knowledge of others' cultural differences, what we call a learner's attitude as well, so they're open to learning about how to address the differences, and then a commitment to the development of cross-cultural skills. In addition to culturally competent care, another component that we see in effective service delivery programs is programs that center the individuals with lived experience in their programming. And when I say this, it's not just as recipients of service, which we're all very familiar with and is an important piece, but also centering individuals with lived experience of disability as professionals, as project leads, as implementers of those programs. Because when we look at the programs that are being funded, and when we look at philanthropy itself, as I mentioned, we are seeing the trend towards more community participatory grant making. And why is that? It's because funders and everyone pretty much understands these issues more than people with lived experience that deal with it day in and day out. So that is not only important for funders to have, but also important for healthcare service delivery to not just care for the individual, provide them with the services, but also look to them as professionals and implementers of projects. Thirdly, when considering key components that make for effective program design, there was a theme of supported decision-making. This is an area that WITH Foundation is committed to, and we are a rarity among funders in that it is something we're comfortable in funding, but supported decision-making, as I know many of you heard some excellent presentations about that yesterday, and got to hear from a few of our previous grantees on that issue and people doing great work. But supported decision-making is a framework that allows the individual with a disability to receive the care and services that they need or that they desire to have without having to surrender their legal rights. So it centers that person, but allows them to develop a support team that can help them address their needs. That being said, I think it's very critical to understand that supported decision-making is not always in conflict with conservatorship or guardianship. For individuals that are under conservatorship or guardianship, it is possible to use the tenets and the supported decision-making approach within a conservatorship or guardianship situation. So I try, when talking to families and talking to loved ones, it's, we all know things happen and you need to go down certain paths for certain reasons, but there's no reason that you can't use a supported decision-making framework within conservatorship or guardianship. Then lastly, number 4, a component that we see when looking at effective program design for healthcare delivery is a shift to e-platforms. So this includes, obviously, as many of you are familiar with, things like telehealth, but also beyond telehealth, making things available, like all the sessions at this conference will be available online. But when we look at healthcare in general and much of the information that's out there and much of what's being funded, there is a shift and an increasing expectation that the information and the projects have a component that's available online. As a smaller foundation ourselves, although we fund nationally, it is a great way to ensure and support organizations being replicated nationally and information truly getting out there. So when examining the overall portfolio of WIS Foundation's grants, it's really an emerging trend and something I anticipate will continue. So, and I know many of you are doing it, but when you think about future efforts and future projects and programs, I think including an online component is important. Obviously, we know money makes the world go round, and there's never enough of it. But when you look beyond kind of our initial reactions, why is it important to talk about the role of philanthropy and the things we're seeing as key components in program design? Does anyone have any thoughts or any initial reactions that they just want to shout out or are thinking about? Exactly. Good one. Anything else? Well, federal cutbacks is a significant piece. Also, I think it's important to understand that we are seeing a decline in individual giving, which means that although people are still giving, we are seeing a concentration of the giving start to happen amongst foundations. So that's a piece of why this is important, and many foundations, especially in the healthcare phase, are looking to each other about their learnings, about what we're seeing, and we learn from each other. So this is what we're communicating to other foundations are good components to see in healthcare service delivery. But there's also the human side of, we're all here, and I know if you're here today, you're here to learn more, or you're already doing extraordinary work, And we're all here because we care about people with disabilities. We want to see them have the best lives possible to achieve whatever goals they have. And something I'm mindful of is it's not just creating the perfect service delivery program. That is critical, but there's little things we do every day that can support and model behaviors that individuals with disabilities benefit from. When I think about my own journey as an individual with spastic diplegic cerebral palsy, since we had the previous presentation, the whole time I was thinking, I know some doctors are going to be analyzing, so I will answer the question for you. Spastic diplegic cerebral palsy. I think I'm a level 3, but I don't know. Please, speak to my previous doctors if they'll. But when I think about my own journey, I had many advantages. I had a mother that was particularly well versed in kind of the disability service system, and she had me involved in my IEP programs before kind of train the trainer was a thing. So I was in my IEP meetings before it was more acceptable. But when it came to healthcare decisions, like any parent, my mother loves me, and she loves me fiercely. That doesn't mean we always get along and haven't had our differences, but, if any of you say anything bad, I'm sure she's gonna, find out who you are and what's going on with you. I'm lovely, at least according to her. But when it came to my healthcare decisions, especially as I got older, there were some concerns. And even though my mother was great and is great about some things, when it came to healthcare decisions as I got older, there was some natural friction. But I will always remember my orthopedic surgeon when I was getting a follow-up for a hip surgery, and there came a point in time where he could tell I was a little bit uneasy, and I wanted to discuss some things, not necessarily in front of my mother. And when you're in the appointment, you can't really always say, I don't want you here, especially because she is such a great advocate, and she has attention to detail and understands all that information. But in that moment, my orthopedic surgeon modeled a behavior that I carry with me today. And he had a way of, he just said, hey, can we just have a moment to chit chat and just catch up? Like, tell me how your day is. And, why don't you go grab a beverage, Mom? And in that moment, my mother was like, okay. But it provided me an opportunity to ask the questions that I wanted to ask. Looking back, the answers were meaningful to me, although they seem kind of simple questions, but I'm glad I got to ask them. But that doctor, whether he knew it or not, was modeling a behavior that was critical to my life and is critical to the lives of others. So I hope today that not only will you take away some of the key components we're seeing in terms of effective healthcare service deliveries, but you will also remember that each of us has the ability to, in big and small ways, make significant differences in the lives of people with disabilities. Many of you already are, but continue on that path and don't forget the power that you have to really make a difference. And we are all united, although we do our work differently. I, as a grant maker, I have the easiest part, find the good work, support it. Y'all have the harder, which is doing the work, but we're all united by our desire for seeing our loved ones with disabilities live the lives they want and have opportunities. That's what all people want, regardless of whether or not they have disabilities, is the ability to live lives filled with opportunity and meaning. So thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for the ways in which you're allowing that to happen for individuals with disabilities. And with that, I will turn it over for the Q&A. And hopefully this wasn't too boring for y'all.